Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Winging F1 podcast. This is going to be a bit of a news episode, a bit of a look ahead to the Bahrain testing that's coming up this week at the end of this week. And yeah, just a little catch up before the season gets underway and we get to see the cars at the track where they will begin the season on the 20th of March, my birthday. But before all of that, we need to introduce the people who I am joined with, Nigel Chu and Freddie Coates. Nigel and Freddie, how are you?
Not too bad, Adam. Not too bad at all. Don't know what else to say.
I'm really good. I'm really happy for testing to finally start. You're not all right. You've clearly got a disease.
Yes, I have. I've had a cold for a while, but it's more annoying than harmful. It's more annoying to the people around me, actually.
Oh no!
Just like Freddie.
Why do you think I went to America? Anyway,
hey, I've not got a cold though.
No, that's true. And it was 27 degrees here a few days ago, and yeah, I still had a cold. How does that work? I don't know. America. Have you got any plans for my birthday?
No, actively shunning it as a day of celebration.
You're not going to watch the race?
I'm going to do that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to focus on that instead of you deliberately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think there might be some FA Cup matches on that day, so I'll probably watch that thinking of you, Adam.
Okay, thank you. I'll appreciate it. Well, Preston aren't in the FA Cup anymore, so I don't think Coventry City are either. So it's a bit of a squib. But anyway, we'll move on to some news. Or Freddie's got some. He's pointing his finger at the camera in a very. This is for audio listeners in a very. I've got something to say way. So I'll open the floor out to you, Freddie.
I was just going to say, I'll bake you a cake and eat it myself and tell you how good it is and not let you have any of it.
Can you film yourself eating it so I get some of the effect?
No, because then I actually have to do it.
Oh, okay. Well, that eases my mind slightly that when I get a message saying, I baked you a cake and then I ate it all myself, then I can know that he didn't actually do it. But
see, Nigel thinks I did that when it was his birthday. Now he does. Now he knows it was just a fake text. He doesn't even know this is a joke. He actually thinks I genuinely said that.
Well, he can come up and invade your flat, to be fair. So it's not really.
No, he can't. We locked the door now because he kept doing that.
Oh, okay, that's understandable. But yeah, we'll move on to some F1 after that jolliness. Haas, what is going on at Haas? Well, they've got rid of Nikita Mazepin and cut the tied in sponsorship with your Alkali, and now they're in a bit of a pickle. They've got one driver going into the season so far. They've got a plane that may not arrive to the test on time with their car and with their parts to be able to start the test. Currently, it's looking like Pietro Fittipaldi will be in the test if they do get to run that, and possibly in the first couple of races of the season. He is the Haas kind of official third driver. But yeah, Freddie, what do you kind of make of the situation and where do you see them going in the immediate future?
In the immediate future, I expect it just to be a case of it seemingly to being weather every storm. It's been rough for Haas recently, but they're getting on with it. Fittipaldi is pretty much confirmed to do the test. Gene Haas said that to the Associated Press on Sunday, and they haven't actually put any confirmation about the first few races, but that's heavily kind of expected, particularly with the first race being in Bahrain, the next race being a week later in Saudi Arabia. What they can do after that with potential options, basically mainly being Antonio Giovinazzi and Nico Hülkenberg, really depends on what they can get organised. Giovinazzi obviously is contracted to a Formula E campaign, but it's probably possible to do a bit of that around a Haas seat as well, around an F1 seat. What with there being a sort of half season for Formula E, with it ending in mid-season for other motorsport seasons, and Giovinazzi can then finish out the season for Haas. But that's all contractual talks that's going to be seemingly going on over the next couple of weeks for Haas, rather than as many expected in the next couple of days. It just seems to be a case with that team of fighting fires when they arise rather than getting any steady momentum. But it's the best time to have all your problems at the start of the season, really, and then to get rid of them before the first race, you could say. So hopefully from Bahrain testing, it's all up from there for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just difficult. It's not been a great couple of years for Haas. In the first test, they completed the least amount of laps as well. And then, obviously, the Russia-Ukraine situations has meant that Mazepin is no longer in F1, which personally I think is a good thing. But for the team, it's not what he would have been thinking about. Or they wouldn't have even considered it, 30 days ago. So it's not ideal. Not having a driver, especially if you're going to have a driver who hasn't done any testing and then you've thrown him in the first race, that's not what you want at all. So it's a difficult situation. And I guess, like Freddie said, the only way is up for them.
And Freddie, what do you think about the decision to remove Nikita Mazepin? And yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Because he's a driver that we have criticised, I think, fairly on the podcast previously, and has a lot of off-the-track issues. So yeah, you want to speak a bit about that?
Yeah, well, the official reason, not official line necessarily, because there's not been so much put out there by Haas, but the official reason really, legally, is that the money's not there, so the drive isn't there for Nikita Mazepin. And really that is the case because from the FIA perspective, he is allowed to race. But then from a sponsorship perspective, he's not able to be sponsored to race. And that's why he isn't in the seat. I feel like his reaction to it on Twitter, where he basically said he would follow all the FIA guidelines and that has apparently been ignored, is a little bit contrite, a little bit odd. You feel like he could have been a bit more soft about the fact that clearly the issue hasn't come from that, and it feels a little bit naive for him to think it's come from seemingly him not really wanting to be in, people just wanting to kick him out, but he's not really taking the line on that. He seems to think he's being kicked out. And I think, to be honest, yeah, it is also a kind of way to get rid of him and a way to just pick up that team from essentially a very political driver who was political within the team as well as just a political presence in, like you say, Adam, off track and on track kind of controversy. It was uncomfortable him being there in the first place. I think we all understand paid drivers, but I think there's more to it with Nikita Mazepin that we all understand. And it was just, it's a shame it came to this for him not to be in an F1 seat. It's a shame it came for an international war where everything is so much bigger than measly F1, frankly, so much bigger than any sports person, which just frankly seems minuscule and ever so slightly pathetic when you compare it to the global situation. But yeah, it seems it's the right move for Haas, isn't it? It's definitely the right move for Haas, and it's the right move for a team which everyone was starting to believe was a Russian team, to think, you know what, no, to regain their position.
Yeah,
there's a whole. Well, go on, Adam.
I completely agree. I think it's best for the sport, first of all, that he's not in it. I don't think he should have been in, have a drive in the first place, given what he's done. And I'm glad now that he is out of it. I think it, just kind of looking at the whole situation, like even a month ago, even 2 months ago, 6 months ago, it just looked like Haas were on this kind of road to becoming a Mazepin team or a Uralkali team, or basically being under the umbrella of Dmitry Mazepin, and that being the situation. So I think it kind of looking at how quickly things change, it's a reminder of how quickly things can change in sport, even when we it can't see how that would happen. And it's going to be tough for Haas because that was their big backing, and that was kind of where they going into this season, it looked like they were steady. And while I don't think all of us were really optimistic about them, it did feel like they had at least a steady kind of ship going into it. But here we are. And yeah, I think it will say a lot about kind of where Gene Haas wants to take the team, depending on who they bring in to fill that seat. Nigel?
There's a much bigger argument in sport about whether athletes and sponsors should be able to compete with teams or sponsor teams. And some people will say, oh, just because they're Russian and they might even support Ukraine, they should be like allowed to compete and stuff like that. But you got to think about these Ukrainian sports people like Alexander Usyk, the heavyweight world champion boxer. He stopped his sport to go out and fight. So if Ukrainians are having to stop and they can't compete, for me, it's only fair that Russians can't compete, no matter what the opinion is and whether they support Putin or not. Because there was a Ukrainian biathlete who was 19 years old. They went out to fight, and sadly, they lost their life, and for something that is completely out of their hands. So this whole argument about Russian athletes in sport being hindered or not being allowed to race or stuff like that, it's tough for me to sympathise with them, even if they don't support Putin's actions. I do sympathise a little bit for the officials and people who are working in the UK, like marshals who might be Russian, because they can't do their job at the moment after the statement last week. So there's a bit of sympathy there, but for Mazepin specifically, I really don't sympathise at all with him losing his Haas drive.
I think I will add as well, Haas are still stable as a team. The Uralkali sponsorship really was there to bridge the gap following COVID, which was really, really hard for every team in Formula One. And so by extension was much harder for Haas. And really, Gene Haas wasn't willing to put too much of his own money into it before there was really a kind of steady structure for pay for Formula One teams and for a level playing field in Formula One, which since then there is now. From 2021 there has been. So really, Gene Haas, either he eats his words and doesn't have any, like you say, commitment to this team. It doesn't have doesn't have the right objective, or it's where it's at the point now where he can fundamentally feel safe to put his own money into it and not be essentially entering a kind of Ponzi scheme or something where you just throw money at it and get nothing back. So Haas is in a better position with money by a long shot than it was when Uralkali came on board.
Yes. Yeah. It's. I think the fact that this is happening a year later and they are kind of out of the worst of COVID is a kind of one silver lining, albeit very thin. But yeah, there's kind of lots to watch on that team. And just to throw one more name out there that I don't think any of us have mentioned yet, Oscar Piastri, who reigning F2, F3, although obviously not reigning now, but F2, F3 and Formula Renault Euro Cup champion 3 years in a row, doesn't have a seat for this year. He's an Alpine junior driver, and I believe the Alpine reserve driver for this year. Do you think there's any possibility of him getting the seat? What do you think needs to fall into place for that to happen?
It doesn't seem very likely. There's hardly any links. In fact, there's been no links between Haas and Alpine ever in F1. And yes, it's a driver everyone wants to see because we want to see the best drivers on the grid, and the F2 champion should be there. But realistically, it's not going to happen. It's going to be between Giovinazzi, Fittipaldi, maybe Hulkenberg. I don't see Piastri, unfortunately, getting the seat.
Yeah, I agree. Piastri's not going to get the seat, in my opinion. Gene Haas also, when he said that the stuff about Fittipaldi doing the test and all of that, he was in the same interview. He said that they're after someone more experienced than Fittipaldi, which basically means they're after someone who isn't a rookie. So they're not going to go for Piastri. End of.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's unlikely, which is a shame because, as you say, we want to see the best drivers on the grid, and I think Oscar Piastri fits into that. They could have a team with the last two F2 champions, which would be exciting, but like they're going to go in that direction. So yeah, there's a lot to watch out for with Haas. We will continue to update on our podcast as and when news breaks.
The question is, would you guys pick Giovinazzi or Fittipaldi? Because those two seem to be the leading contenders. Which ones would you rather have in the seat?
Yeah, it's really, really tricky because I think, Giovinazzi, at the end of the day, he did hold his own against Raikkonen. And when he poked his head up above the parapet, he was sometimes exceptional, but a lot of time he was middling. So it's really what you've seen with that. Fittipaldi, only in the 2 races he did, was actually very good. But whether that was very good at being middling, who knows? We don't know what his glass ceiling is. I feel like Fittipaldi and Giovinazzi would both be excellent in that team. I think Fittipaldi obviously is so well loved in that team. He's really well liked. He's been there for 5 years or so now, and is still there and is still very, very well coordinated there. I think Giovinazzi would be given a G up by getting another chance, to be honest, and that would, that works wonders for any driver, I think. So who knows? I think it's really a kind of weird case in the fact that both of them have the potential to be, I think, good middling drivers. I think Giovinazzi, over the course of his entire career, if we count junior career in this as well, has shown that he has pace that is extremely fast. I think Fittipaldi has shown that he's a good driver, but not extremely fast. So I think out of those two, I'd take Giovinazzi.
I would.
Okay.
Go on, Adam.
Okay, I definitely agree. I mean, Fittipaldi, his junior racing career just doesn't kind of show anything really. He got the super license by kind of the easiest method possible if you were plotting it out, and he got the win the World Series V8 Formula 3.5, I believe, which in kind of one of its last year as a championship, where it had way too many points for what it actually was and what it showed. So I think I do think he kind of showed better than I expected him to when he came into those races with Haas at the end of the 2020 season. And, I kind of thought in terms of the two, he was kind of on a par with Jack Aitken, or maybe even outshone Jack Aitken a bit. I'm not sure, but out of those two coming in a similar situation. So, I don't think he's like the worst driver to have in that situation, but I completely take Giovinazzi kind of just off. He's a known commodity.
See, I think I would rather see a driver who hasn't really raced in F1 in a full season than a driver who's had 3 or 4 years in F1 and has had the time to shine and hasn't. I would rather see someone who's a new driver, quite frankly. Even no matter what the junior record is, you never know when you get into an F1 car. The style's different, the way you have to drive it, the environment, everything's different. And it might suddenly just fit Fittipaldi. It could. It's not likely, but there's still that chance. And we know Giovinazzi, his peak, he hasn't really delivered. And so I wouldn't mind it if Fittipaldi got the nod. I don't know if you two want to come back at me with that.
No, I completely get it. I mean, it's something I normally say on this kind of thing, is to go for the left field choice and go for a driver who I think, this guy's really good, who no one's ever heard of. Like, that's normally my route. So I'm all up for just any, a cool young driver. And I think Pietro Fittipaldi is that. I'm all up for different storylines, giving people chances and so on.
I think the kind of only thing I agree, it's for more F1 drivers getting the opportunity to show what they can do, that is a good thing. I think my main kind of counter to that is I'd like to see how Mick does in a car against a kind of seasoned opponent as well. And if he's had a season with Mazepin and a season with Pietro Fittipaldi, it's kind of if it's quite hard to judge on that. So I can see the reasoning for wanting Fittipaldi.
You swayed me with that point, actually. You've actually saying that's a great point. You swayed me.
Well, that's what
you're awful at debate, Nigel.
I know. I can't. No, that is a genuinely good point, though. The only other point I've got is that Fittipaldi brings in some money, like Mazepin. He brings in the Telemex sponsor.
He brings it anyway.
Do still need a bit. Yeah, true. I forgot.
He's already the reserve driver. I mean, there is an element in his contract that means should a situation arise where there is need for a reserve driver, he has to be used as a reserve driver. That is in his contract because of the sponsorship money that's provided. So it depends what can be interpreted as a situation arising, considering this all went into action at least 2 to 3 weeks before the first race. But whether that means he gets 1 or 2 races, which you all seem to think anyway, but whether that means that's contractual rather than to buy time, we don't know. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it would be cool to see Pietro given another shot being in Formula One, just because, yeah, you know, he didn't disgrace himself last time. It's not like he came in and was dire as a reserve driver. Yeah. He was a good reserve driver, and he knows the process of that team inside out. He's one of the longest serving employees of that team, just in general. So,
yeah,
why not reward loyalty in that regard?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does go. And you know, it looks like he'll get some opportunity in the seat, and you know, I also think Haas can play it by ear and by eye a bit and see how he goes and whether they feel the need to replace him. And just, I was just going to add this in for people who might have been wondering, this is Pietro Fittipaldi we're talking about, because there is a large Fittipaldi clan across junior racing. He's the grandson of 2-time champion Emerson Fittipaldi. So yeah, just to clear that up for anyone who was wondering. Anything else to say on this?
There's just something incredibly retro about a driver's seat being sort of hop in, hop out, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's something very, it's something that you kind of really haven't seen since sort of proper wheeler dealer F1, like proper Eddie Jordan kind of just like, oh, we'll do a deal to do this race. Like it was done in kind of a bad way by the backmarket teams in sort of 2010, 2011, when they'd be like, oh, I've done a deal for this guy to do this race and this guy to do this race, that kind of thing. Like that was when it was silly. But when it's kind of like, I don't know, just getting drivers in because they're good and like saying, oh, we've got to get a driver and just get a good driver. Let's have a look for a good driver, that kind of thing. I don't know. It takes me back to the 90s, which I don't remember, but takes me back to
me and Nigel never experienced. And just finally, Schumacher and Fittipaldi would be the best surname F1 team ever. I think
not since Villeneuve and Hill, arguably. I think.
I was thinking of those, but you know, 9 championships between them, I think, kind of cast a bit of a shadow on Villeneuve Hill, or you know, puts them in the shade a tad. But yeah, we'll move on to that, but stay on Russia, because the Russian Grand Prix has been terminated and its contract has been terminated. Obviously, Sochi for this year has already been cancelled, and there was plans to move to Igora Drive going forward, but that is now seemingly off the table, and it's part of a kind of general worldwide sports boycott of Russia that we've already discussed pertaining to individuals. And I don't think there's really been anything like this since the kind of apartheid sports boycott in the 80s, and F1 was a part of that as well in the latter stages of it. But yeah, just kind of, I don't know whether there is too much discussion to be had on it, but Nigel, what's your kind of thoughts, or were you shocked?
The right thing to do. I'm glad F1 has done it relatively early as well, because saying that they're not going to go this year is one thing, but saying they're not going to go next year, that's a pretty big step, because who knows what's going to happen over the next 12 months. So a very good decision from F1. I think it makes a point, it makes a statement, and if F1 doesn't go back to Russia for another 10, 20, 30 years, that's fine by me, quite frankly.
Yep, it's for the foreseeable future, which is a long way away, and that's fine by me.
Yes, yeah, it'd been, it's just completely the right, sensible decision, and it's F1 kind of making that statement because Russia was one of the Grand Prix from countries that are trying to use sport to legitimize dodgy actions, and the fact that they're kind of bringing that away can only be a good thing. And there'll always be people who point to other races or say, if you're not outraged at all of these, then you shouldn't be outraged at one. But yeah, I think it's completely the right decision.
Not started a war, have they?
Well, yeah, quite.
Well, I mean, is this just on
even
that?
If it was Britain, even if it was Britain, then I would say there shouldn't be a British Grand Prix. But anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, and on that, it's just kind of like, if you start criticizing for one good thing not being a completely different, not being a reaction to a different bad thing, then what are you saying? Just kind of like, oh, just do nothing? I mean, come on, no, don't give that time of day, to be honest. Let's just not talk about that.
Yeah, it's one of the things that frustrates me most about the world today, among many things. But yeah, so that's
Sorry,
the end. That's okay. It's the internet. But yeah, that's the end of all of the Russia talk. But just to work,
and now for Adam's 5G conspiracy corner.
I've still not got 5G, so I get adverts about it, but I've not got a good enough phone. Anyway, Freddie's shown a lock screen to us. So yeah, if you're lucky
5G.
enough to be watching, then lucky you. But yeah, moving on to the other piece of news that has come out, which is Verstappen has had his contract extended at Red Bull until 2028, when I will be mass 27 and Freddie will be 37. Nigel, were you surprised at the length of it? It seems to make sense for Red Bull to lock down their star.
I think it does absolutely make sense. And it's the perfect fit. Verstappen, his style, his personality on the track, he's so aggressive and attacking, and that just suits Red Bull's kind of mantra, how they go racing. So it's one of those relationships which, just like how somebody was at McLaren and then he left, obviously, but at the moment I can't see Verstappen leaving Red Bull. He's got no reason to, unless they drop down to 5th or 6th worst car. He's been with them since 2014 when he was in F3, and he just seems to love them. I think he just wants to enjoy his driving, and clearly the team, it's a fun environment. Everything is perfect at the moment, really. So it doesn't surprise me too much, and I think everyone wins from it.
Yeah, it is everybody wins. I agree. It's Max basically fulfilling his love for the team, and it's Red Bull keeping their winning driver, and Max gets a lot of money out of it, and Red Bull have got a lot of money from sponsorship because of Max's driving. We've reported on the Oracle and the Bybit deals where they've got essentially 150 million quid coming in a year. So that's great, and that it works as a winning partnership between the two of them. So keep it going. That's logic.
Yeah. It'd be weird. Well, not weird. It'd be incredible if they carried on until 2028. I don't think we've ever seen any driver stay with a team for more than 12 years. That would be unprecedented.
Yeah, that'd just be mind blowing. I mean, it's not, and also it's kind of he wasn't with Red Bull for kind of ages before he went into F1. I don't know if it's a misconception or just the fact that he got into F1 so early, but he signed in 2014. Alex Albon was at the academy before that, or the driver program. And, he has just been a part of them in F1 for so long, and kind of it's not too long before he'll be coming up to 10 years in F1. And it's just like been such a rapid, such kind of rapid rise to be an F1 driver, and then just staying for so long there. And it's like all contracts, there'll be ways out if things do turn sour or go south, and that's always the case. But as a statement to say we have got arguably the best driver in the world right now, probably the best driver in the world right now, and we are locking him down until 2028 is huge.
Verstappen is currently 12th on the list for Grand Prix with the same constructor.
Wow.
And that's level with Vettel at Ferrari. So there's one more Grand Prix, then he's above that anyway. So It's pretty mad that. It's pretty mad.
Does that count his? I'm assuming that doesn't count his Toro Rosso.
No, that's just with Red Bull.
No.
That's with Red Bull. But if you add presumably 23, 24 races to that, will put him, just mental maths, that would put him about fifth on the list.
Listeners can hear the cogs turning, especially you got headphones in.
Yeah.
There's speculation that Verstappen might join Mercedes and usurp Hamilton when he leaves F1. So the only thing from this is that, for me, is that it does put the spotlight more on Russell and whether he can deliver or not, and whether he will be the driver to take over Hamilton. Because say Russell doesn't perform that well this year, then Mercedes probably would have looked to Verstappen, but now they can't. So that is the only other thing from me with this contract news.
Yeah, as I say, I imagine if Mercedes and Verstappen really, really want to get a deal, then there's always a way. But yeah, it really kind of locks off that kind of mostly. But it's kind of been the way, and obviously Leclerc signed his monster contract, and it's they're all the teams, and Norris as well. Although his wasn't as long, there are teams positioning to get their stars locked down. It is kind of approaching a battle royale phase, and to be honest, I can't really see a reason why Verstappen would leave. Even the way Red Bull have fought back over most of his time there, to be honest, fought back from being just not in the running for a lot of the V6 era so far, and then just really ground their way back up the ranking and close the gap to Mercedes. I think that gives me huge confidence that even if they're not there this season, then there's plenty of reasons to stick by them for the long haul. And that is all of Verstappen. That's all of the news, really. But something that Verstappen will be involved in his first official track outing since signing the contract is the Bahrain test, the first pre-season test of the year, if you believe F1 marketing, or if you're normal, then it's the second test of the year, and it's obviously at the same track the season opener will be at. There's a few, we expect teams to be bringing significantly upgraded cars from what they had at Barcelona. So, Freddie, what are you kind of looking out for over this week? Anything in particular, or just seeing where things sit?
Oh, well, we've got a whole load of upgrades coming, don't we? We've got B-Spec cars from Merc, B-Spec car for Red Bull. And I think B-Spec for Alpine, I'm not sure on that. Alpine are just weird. But really what we're just looking out for is more of the same from the Barcelona test, really. This is where really teams should be now refining. They should be figuring out what they're doing, and essentially, hopefully, we'll get some performance runs, because we will be having some representative running, because the last hour of the Bahrain test is under lights. So we should be getting some performance running in the afternoon session. I would imagine it would be foolish not to. They really should be honing the setup and seeing what they can do with different tires and in different temperatures across the day, because yes, it's in Bahrain. Yes, the race is in Bahrain, but you can simulate a loss in Bahrain being with the whole day and with all 5 tire compounds available. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because a lot could have changed since Barcelona. There's a lot of talk that the new changes that have been brought in by a lot of the teams, because they've been shared with the FIA, and apparently they're not in the spirit of the regulations. So, I mean, I'm so not surprised. I think I've probably said on this podcast, and I've definitely said off podcast to people, give engineers regulations to make cars able to follow, and straight away they'll be seeing how they can make their car hard to follow. It's just the mind of a racer. So it will be interesting to see a rumbling debate about that, presumably from 4:00 on Wednesday.
I think the development race has started now. Well, you could argue it started last year, but it's kind of proper because we get to see them in the second test. So And if they don't work, if those upgrades don't work, then the teams will be on the back foot, and that won't affect them for the first few races. So it'll be key to get that right. And we're going to have full access to the live timing as well, so we can see race stints, which is when we'll be able to see which teams are performing well when there's lots of fuel on board. So it's all just very exciting. And I think the final hour on the Saturday, we're going to get something similar to last year when we had, I think it was Tsunoda and Verstappen, they were going for it, and then it was Verstappen who went fastest, and then a week later he was on pole. So you do get a good indicator as to who is looking good, and hopefully we should get that this weekend.
Yeah, it's especially that last hour, like you say, is going to be something to keep an eye on. And I guess the other thing to note is Pirelli have announced their tyre compounds for the season opener in Bahrain, and they're going to be a step harder than last season. So it's going to be C1, C2, and C3, with C3 being the softest. So yeah, the teams are going to be going in with much more information and know what, where they're going to be standing, and it will be a lot for the teams to look at. But do you think they'll have sorted out or made steps to sort out the porpoising issue? Because it's not been that long since Barcelona testing, and it's at a different track entirely. But at the same time, they've only got a week and a bit till the season starts, and they need to have something sorted by then.
They'll have made steps, but they won't have sorted it out. They will not have sorted it out. This is going to be a problem for years. And Bahrain's not a track, nor is Barcelona, where it's that awful of a problem, apparently. That's what I hear from people cleverer than me. I can't tell you why, but yes.
Why they're cleverer than you?
Oh, yeah, exactly that.
Okay.
Really, with ground effect, the best way to test it is to put it on the ground. And with such limited testing, this is the only testing they're going to get. So maybe there's a CFD problem or a wind tunnel way of figuring it out, but really is a really, really difficult one to actually sort out until you're running the car anyway. So there's even probably an argument to be made for the fact that they wouldn't have made any progress on this issue.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm potentially leaning towards. But, it's like we say, F1 moves quickly, and, they do. You'd hope that they'd have made steps, seeing as they're going to be on track before too long. So, yeah, it's a lot to look out for, and I can't wait. I can't wait to see where things are at. But just kind of finally, the other kind of question I wanted to ask is, like, how do you think it is? Do you think it's a good thing that they're having testing on the same track that they're going to be racing on in a few weeks? Because that was one of the criticisms of Barcelona as a testing and a race venue, is that teams turn up with so much data on the track, and now they're going to kind of have that, but only turning up the next week to be racing.
Means nothing.
Oh, yeah. I think in terms of having an exciting race or not, just last year, the Bahrain race was absolutely brilliant. It was arguably the race of the year, so it doesn't make a difference at all. I don't think there's anything to it, really.
Yeah, teams are going to have data of every track they go to. They're going to, and particularly considering we've been to the majority of the tracks in the calendar for the past 20 years, they're going to have data that they had from last year from a full-on race. So it's better than testing anyway. So really, the criticisms against Barcelona being the same place they test at, that's nothing. That's just an excuse to criticize Barcelona, really. And that's not the reason that races can be bad at Barcelona. That's the awkward, tight, narrow, medium speed corners.
And the conditions are massively different anyway, just week on week, never mind month on month. And the conditions make a massive difference to everything. So it really doesn't matter.
Well, there we go. That's all of our testing talk rounded up. And we'll be looking at what happens with interest over the next few days into the end of the week. But something else we're going to be watching with interest maybe over the next few days is Drive to Survive, which comes out in, I don't know, people might not have Netflix. I didn't have Netflix before last year.
I'm not watching it.
Right, exactly. There you go. You laugh. It's coming out on Friday. Freddie, seeing as you are the keenest Drive to Survive fan out of all of us, what do you think about the series? What are you looking forward to it more than usual, less than usual? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I'm a sucker for F1 content. Really, that's where I lie. But I think it's great. It's nice to see. It's always been nice to see Formula One become mainstream, and Drive to Survive's done that. And it's nice to see it in a different way to the way I view it, which is from a nerdy, oh, I'm going to talk about this on a podcast way, rather than a, oh, this is us distilling this for the masses, like the masses, not just F1 masses. So it's great. I think it's just a fantastic thing for F1. I do think, it has right for criticism, and as a series, they do bend the truth on a few things, but I kind of feel like you have to do that for documentaries sometimes, particularly one that's so restricted in the making of as Drive to Survive. They do kind of have to take what they're given a bit, and what they're given isn't necessarily what they want to get 10 episodes, in my opinion. So I'm going to defend them on that. But I do think they should.
I think some of the things. I mean, in particular, the Sainz Norris rivalry.
Yeah, it's stupid. It's
stupid.
But what else are they going to say?
Well, don't put in a radio. Don't put in a radio message that makes it look like they're having a crash or having a fight when they're not. I think that I don't think that's really to do with what the content they've got. I think that's just not what the sport needs. That's not kind of indicative of my wider view, but I just think some things I think it aren't necessary or aren't kind of forced on them by a lack of content.
I agree that that stuff is bad and shouldn't be there. I think my caveat for it is that I think I wouldn't know what they would put in its place based on what they're able to film, particularly during 2020 and 2021. Those I think from this year onwards, I think there does need to be a rejig on how they do it to keep the show fresh. And I think they need to focus on storylines in front of them rather than trying to do a glorified season review, because that is already done by everyone in November, December.
Including us.
Exactly. So that's not what Drive to Survive is. Drive to Survive is a fly on the wall, and I think that COVID has hampered that, and I think that's going to be pretty obvious in this series as well, as it was in the 2020 series. It hasn't gone back to where it was in Series 1 and Series 2, in my opinion, and from what I've heard from people who've seen Season 4, they agree. So I'd be interested to see where Drive to Survive goes in the future, but I'm definitely going to watch it because I like seeing more of Formula One. I like seeing exclusive interviews with drivers where they're a bit more candid. I like seeing the same with team bosses. So yeah, hopefully it's got a few nuggets in there and it's quite good. But I think, to be honest, everything that's going to be a breakthrough in there is going to have been reported. But you know what? I like seeing F1 on Netflix. It's just cool to me.
It's Freddie's right. It's not for me, but the impact it's had has been absolutely huge. Millions. We're talking about millions of people who now watch F1 when 2 years ago that wasn't the case. And just on a personal level, people are talking to me about F1 more than ever. And just because of Drive to Survive, yes, it was great as well. But Drive to Survive has had a very positive impact overall for F1, and that you can't really argue against that. Ultimately, F1's aim is to get more fans tuned in, get more engagement, and that's exactly what's happened. Yeah,
I'm very much with Nigel. I think, I don't know, I wasn't so much of a fan of last season. I think just this, I don't know, everything that went on last season, it was a fantastic season on the track, and I think there was a lot of kind of silliness going on off the track, and that, that's where Drive to Survive is. That's kind of where it's meeting graveyard. So I'll probably watch it. I'm not going to mark it in my calendar or counting down the days to it, but I think, like you say, it is inarguable that it has had a huge impact on F1 and just opened it up to such a large fan base. And there's talk of being a similar cycling Drive to Survive, Cycle to Survive.
Well, there's so many, aren't there? There's MotoGP Unlimited coming out 4 days afterwards. You've already had the Ashes to Ashes. Is that what? I don't know what it's called, the cricket one, which is on Prime Video, which is fantastic. There's a few others. There's a golf one as well. There's so many of these things that have taken the Drive to Survive model and have used it to grow their sport, and successfully have done. And it's fantastic that they've been able to do that. It does work.
That's what I was going on to. That I think, the reaction of everyone towards the cycling one when it was just rumoured before it was kind of even announced was just so positive, because they've seen what it can do. And speaking to fans here who kind of have watched Drive to Survive and then started watching F1 after it, I was talking to someone who'd been watching it. I think they're kind of watching it through from season one, and I think they're on season two, and the Ricardo stuff. And I said, and he ends up at McLaren, and they said, you spoilt it, which kind of felt a bit, it's not an actual TV show, but that's
it's
just
how people want to watch it. I think that's absolutely fine. That's a completely fine way to watch it.
Yeah, that just kind of felt so educational to me. So I think it's fantastic, but at the same time, I agree. I'd like to see them kind of, change it and freshen it up before it's too long. And I don't want F1 to become kind of entertainment. And I not, or
I know what you mean with that. It's just
not entertainment
sentence.
First. Yeah, no, that is. I should have worded that better. I don't want it to become entertainment first, and I hope they're kind of still working and just tweaking it to make sure that it is kind of F1 leading Drive to Survive, not the other way around.
I think last thing I'll say on that is there's always a lot of criticism on, particularly for the season just gone, where it's like, I can't wait for the George and Mercedes episode of Drive to Survive. But it's kind of like, well, you're never going to get it, because what's great about F1 is that it knocks us for 6 every other week. We don't know what's going to happen. And Netflix can't follow that, because particularly in COVID era, they've got to bubble up and stuff like that with teams, and they still have to now. And I think a lot of the criticism that gets stemmed at Drive to Survive is kind of like, well, they didn't show this bit that I wanted to see more of. But it's kind of like, well, you've already arguably seen more of that than what they will show you. So I kind of think there's a lot of room for slack for Drive to Survive that isn't necessarily given the time of day, in my opinion, from a documentary making perspective. That you're never going to, they're never in 10 episodes, they're never going to have immense detail on stuff that happens in the moment that they're not really able to go and see, which is why in the last few years for season 3 and this season 4 just to come, there's a lot more F1 footage in there, because they need to do that, because that's the way of the world after a global pandemic. And I think we should commend them for being able to continue to produce this documentary series, and for everyone doing this kind of stuff across sport and entertainment. To be honest, actually, it's a wider point. Like, to be able to do this kind of stuff and to continue producing the content without delay is phenomenal.
I completely agree. And coming to university in America, where I've done more kind of filming and more TV and documentary stuff, just seeing the absolute effort, to produce 10 hours of Drive to Survive, or however long it is, the amount of days and weeks of just solid work that is put into to produce those 10 hours is mind-blowing. So yeah, I was miffed that they didn't show Williams. I thought they could have had from what Claire Williams said, they had a fair amount of Williams footage. So I thought that was that was a grudge from last season. But on the wider point, yeah, they are hamstrung and in COVID, and that's going to be the reality, at least for this season. Maybe for more seasons, we don't know. But yeah, it will continue to be a huge asset to F1. And like I said, we can see that from the way other sports are looking for these series, and other fan bases are reacting to having these series, touted about them. Anything else to add on any of that?
Oh, just watch it. To be honest, even if you're going to gripe about it, watch it, because there will be stuff that you love about it. And I think I've got my housemates have know more about Formula One now because of it, just because I just have it on in the background every now and again. It's seen on Netflix, and yeah, I risk it sound like a broken record. It's really good just to give to someone who's your mate who you want to be into Formula One. It's really good for that.
Well, there we go. Covered a lot in this episode, and it's been a really good one. So yeah, we'll be following the testing with interest, and all of the other developments going on, particularly at Haas, where they come out of this week with and going into the season with. But that's everything for now. Thank you very much for listening, watching, however you are consuming our presence on the internet. Goodbye.